Okay, we are on part 2 of a series about strengthening your family. This is, I think, one of the, well, there's 4 of them. This one may be the strongest of the 4. I don't know. I guess it depends on where you're at in this situation, if you're single or have children, or I guess it just depends. But this is a powerful message. Actually, it's a lesson that I got from listening to a series Rick Warren from Saddleback did, and thought that we as a church would benefit from it. But here's what I want you to do. I want you just to relax and take notes. If you have an outline there, if you need one, raise your hand. I think I gave her one. Does anyone need an outline? Okay. It'll take a little bit of time to get through this, so I just want you to relax, enjoy yourself, take notes. And try not to give elbows to your spouse when you hear something about your spouse that is really true, and concentrate on yourself, and let's just have a good time with this. A lot of information that's going to be covered here. What I need to tell you is that you're not going to be able to accomplish all this in one night. So don't try. Just start where you're at and do little by little and begin implementing these into your life and into your family, and I think you'll see some great results. Last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, as we began this series, we asked the question, what is a family for? And we defined biblically what a family is for. Next week, the lesson or the message is this: how to raise kids without raising your blood pressure. How many of you are interested in that? But now tonight what we want to talk about is how to restore harmony in the home. Every home, if it's made up of more than one person, is going to have conflict. It just is natural, and it's going to come about. So let me begin by sharing with you 5 conflicts, or the most common 5 conflicts in the home. They are these: money, sex, children, communication, and I know this last one's going to be a surprise to many of you, in-laws. I thought you ought to appreciate that. Now, okay, I want you to be sure you're relaxed. All right. As I think about this, these 5 of them, I wonder if any of us are batting 1,000. In other words, in our home, we are experiencing all 5 of these conflicts as we speak. Well, conflict is common. It's going to happen. And so what we want to talk about tonight is how do we address it? In other words, how do we respond to the conflict when it does come up? Because how we respond to the conflict is going to determine whether our families get torn apart or not, because conflict is going to come. In Mark chapter 3, verse 25, in the Good News Bible, Jesus says, if a family divides itself into groups which fight each other, that family will fall apart. And in the Living Bible, the same verse says, a home filled with strife and division destroys itself. Folks, conflict management, in my opinion, ought to be a must for marriage. In fact, I believe in it so much that I refuse to marry anybody unless they go through, and I'd rather them do it with me, but at least go through some sort of counseling that involves conflict management. It is that important, I believe, in a successful marriage and a successful family. So let me ask a question here. Those of us that are married, how many of us that are married were sat down before we got married, and somebody, whether it be a pastor or a counselor or a parent or somebody, sat us down and taught us how to fight fair? Raise your hand. Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't think we'd have anybody. Now, I'm not raising my hand as one of them. I was just giving you an example because I didn't either. Most of us have not been through that. Those that have had that experience probably have benefited greatly from it. You see, conflict is inevitable. And what we need to learn how to do is how to handle that conflict. And that's what we're going to do tonight. 3 areas that we're going to cover: the reason for conflict, the reactions to conflict, and then the resolution to conflict. Let's look at the reason first. The reason for conflict, as James describes it in chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. What causes fights and quarrels among you? Don't they come from your desires that battle within you? You want something, but you don't get it. Now, in your notes, it says the cause of conflict. Here's the answer: competing desires. Competing desires. In other words, I want what I want, and you want what you want, and when they're not the same, trouble happens. Conflict comes. If what I want and what you want are not the same, conflict is going to come about. Now, let me make it real simple for us. Children, youth, adults, answer this. How many of you in your home have a remote control? Come on. Everybody that has a remote control, raise your hand. Now, let me ask you a question. When there's more than one of you in the living room, is there conflict because of that remote control? Yeah, because, I want to watch what I want, and you want to watch what you want, and we have trouble. See, at 6:05 at my house, it's an unwritten rule, and I should write it and post it, but it's an unwritten rule that at 6:05, we're going to watch Andy Griffith, because I love watching Barney. But you see, my kids, they like this show, but they prefer to watch Family Matters, and I like that show too, but I want to watch Barney. And because I want to watch what I want, and they want to watch what they want, guess what? We have trouble from time to time about what we're actually going to want. Well, those of us that are married, if you can remember back to when that day happened, and you stood at the altar, if you can go back to the long days ago, do you remember standing at that altar and having certain expectations of what your marriage was going to be about? Just about everybody came to the altar with certain expectations. I remember coming to the altar and just assuming that my wife would have supper cooked for me every night I got home. It didn't take me long to figure out that wasn't going to happen. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming that Darlene thought that she was marrying somebody that would be a home repair guy, a guy that would fix anything that went wrong in the house, because that's the way her dad was. And it didn't take her long to figure out it wasn't going to get fixed if I had to do it. Just not my area. Call somebody else, and it'll get done. So you come into the marriage with certain expectations, and let me just say this to you. Many of those expectations are actually unrealistic. And that's where we get into trouble. And in the counseling, at least that I do, I want the soon-to-be married couple to begin discussing what they expect so they can weed out some of those unrealistic expectations. That's part of the process. Well, somebody once said that a marriage goes through 3 phases. If you've been married very long at all, you'll identify with these 3 phases. The first phase of a marriage is the happy honeymoon. Don't we wish we could stay in that phase? What a wonderful time. Well, when that phase is over, we go to phase 2, stage 2, and that is the party's over. The party, turn the lights out, the party's over. Well, when that stage is over, we go to the 3rd stage, and it's called Let's Make a Deal. What do we need to do to sell this? Just tell me the deal. That's, whatever we need to do. Conflict is inevitable. How are we going to react to it? We usually react to conflict one of 5 ways. Let me share these with you. The reactions to conflict. First one is called my way. My way. My way says that I win. Under any and all circumstances, my way says that I win. And I'm going to assert my will until you give in. Because I want my way. You see, I'm totally right and you are totally wrong. My way. Because my way is the only way. Some people react to conflict this way. My way. The second way is called no way. No way. No way means that I withdraw. If there's a conflict going on, I withdraw. I backpedal. I get away from the conflict. I don't want to deal with it. I ignore the problem. I'm going to avoid it at all costs. See, some of us deal with conflict no way. We backpedal. Folks, if that describes you, you need to understand that you're not ever going to get anything resolved by backing away all the time. Okay? The third way is called your way. Your way. See, your way means that I'm going to give in to you. See, whatever you want, your way, I'm going to give in to you. I'm going to roll over and play dead and let you have what you want. Because your approval is so important to me that I'm going to pretend that I'm a doormat and just let you have your way. I'm going to do whatever you suggest, whatever you want. That's called your way. Now, I need to tell you that it's a very peaceful way to live because both people appear to be happy. The person getting their way obviously is very happy. And the person that is doing it, giving their way, they're trying to keep conflict and stress at a low level. And so in the household, it appears to be very peaceful. But folks, the person living your way is leading a very frustrating life. A very frustrating life. All right, number 4, halfway. Halfway. Halfway says that I give in a little and you give in a little. Halfway is a compromise. You see, you win sometimes, and then sometimes I get to win. That sounds good, doesn't it? Sounds like a good way to do it. And I'll admit to you that this way is better than the other ways. But folks, it's not the best way. See, halfway sounds good. It's certainly better than the others, but it is not the best way. The best way is called our way. O-U-R, our way. See, when we react to conflict our way, what that means is we're going to work out mutual goals together. Not your way and not my way, but together, our way. It means caring about solving the problem, yes, but also about the relationship itself. See, whenever we elevate the problem and a resolution to the problem above the relationship, we get into trouble. And our way says that both are meaningful. Our way says that I care about you and you care about me. That is, we want to have a mutually satisfactory answer and resolution and solution, but we also want to have a satisfying marriage. Because you can have a satisfactory solution to the problem, doing it your way, no way, halfway, or my way, but the marriage is not satisfactory for both people. See, under our way, you have a resolution to the problem, but you also have a satisfying marriage. Now, the rest of this lesson is going to be based on our way. See, we're going to dismiss the other ones. Our way. And we want to look at 8 ways to resolve conflict based on our way. The resolution to conflict. 8 of these. Folks, I need to let you know that this is a step-by-step process. You begin with number 1, then you go to number 2, and you work your way down the list. If you try to jump in the middle, you're going to leave out some important stuff. So when you're having conflict and you want resolution and you pull these notes out, and I hope that you will, begin with number 1. Go to number 2, and then go to number 3. Okay, number 1, or A, is become a Christian. Become a Christian. That sounds simple enough, and we understand that, but let me just put something to this. The Bible says that you and I, that nobody can have peace with others until we first have peace with God. See, the Bible says that if we're not saved, if we don't have a relationship with God through Jesus Christ, we are at odds with Him. We are in conflict with God. We are, in fact, at war with God. So how can we have peace with someone else when we don't have peace with the main relationship, or the relationship that we ought to have in our life? So the first step in a successful family life and a married life is to become a Christian. Okay? You see, folks, there would be harmony in our homes if all of us would gather around the throne of Christ. If we would just gather around the throne of Christ, there would be harmony. Ephesians 2:6 says, as parts of the same body, our anger against each other has disappeared. For both of us have been reconciled to God, and so the feud has ended at the cross. I don't know about you folks, but if I'm upset with somebody, and I go to the cross, and I begin to look at Christ and what He did for me, that anger just goes right away. It's like, it's not even important anymore because of what He did for me. And the love that He has for me just washes over and takes care of what a little problem I may have had or a situation at the throne of Christ. Become a Christian, first one, letter A. Letter B, talk to God about the conflict. Talk to God about the conflict. See, we got to seek God out first. Unfortunately, He's usually the last one that we go to, and He ought to be the first one. In other words, go to Him, pray about it, and admit it to Him. God, I'm having this problem. Or we're having a problem. Or the group is having a problem. Whatever it may be, there's a problem, God, and I want to admit that to you right off the bat. There's a problem. Because, folks, when you do that, you know what? You might solve it right there. You may not have to go through the rest of these steps, at least on this particular case. When you admit it to Him, it may be resolved right then. But you've got to go to God. James 4:2 says, you quarrel and fight. You do not have because you do not what? Ask God. You don't ask God. I don't ask God. Folks, we need to remember this. Please etch this in your mind. Many of the conflicts that we have, regardless of whether it's at work, at church, in this case we're talking about the family, occur because we expect somebody else to meet the needs that God Himself expects to meet. Did you hear that? See, we get upset with somebody else because we want them or a group to meet our need, and it's God who wants to meet that need. But we project that onto somebody else or to a group. And so because we have a need that's not being met, we try to do something drastic to solve the problem so we can get our need met. And so the answer, the solution to many of us is to begin fighting. to begin quarreling. You see, if I can gripe at you, or I can belittle you, or get angry at you, or do something to you to make you change your mind or your actions to meet my need, then everything's okay. At least that's what we think. That is the solution that some of us do, is we begin fighting. And God is saying, no, do not do that. That is not the solution. God says, come to me, ask me first. Seek me out first. Because, folks, God is the answer to all things. And, folks, He will meet your needs. You need to understand, I'm saying meet your needs. One of the things I'm trying to educate my children is there's a difference between wants and needs. Okay? For instance, I want a new car, or I need a new car. That's not a need. That's a want. Okay? And we need to understand that in our relationship to God, that He's not going to give us everything we want, but He will take care of everything that we need, according to His blessings. Okay. Let me share this with you. Do you know that you and I have a built-in device that God put into us to help us know if we are expecting someone else to meet our need? And it's usually our spouse, by the way. Do you know we have a built-in device in us that tells us if we are expecting someone else to meet our need instead of God? Do you know what that device is called? It's called anger. Now, test me on this. Think of the last time you got angry. Why did you get angry? I'll guarantee it was because somebody didn't do something that you wanted to meet a need that you had. Think about it. You'll agree with it, I guarantee, because I thought about this a long time. So, oh, yeah, that's right. See, every time I've gotten angry, it's because I expected somebody to do something for me or something that would meet a need in my life. And anger is a built-in device. And, folks, when you begin to have anger, you need to start asking yourself, am I expecting this person or this group to do something for me? Am I expecting them to meet a need? And God says, first of all, talk to Him about that conflict. Okay. C, analyze the problem. Analyze the problem. Seems like an easy step, but many of us just shoot right past it. We don't take time to think about it. We assume if we're upset, it's got to be somebody else's fault. You know, if we're upset, it's got to be somebody else's fault, because if it wasn't, I wouldn't be upset. But we've got to analyze it. We've got to think through it. And the first step, listen, the first step is ask yourself. I need to ask myself, what part am I playing in this problem? Rarely will you see a problem where only one person's at fault. So you and I got to begin to ask ourselves, are we at fault in any way before we go to somebody else, our spouse or another brother or whoever the case may be, and begin accusing them? We first have to deal with self. Deal with self. In fact, Matthew 7:3 says, why then do you look in your brother's eye, and you pay no attention to the log in your own eye? Take the log out of your own eye first, and then you will be able to see and take the speck out of your brother's eye. And this is teaching us that we deal with self first before we go to anybody else. So you have to ask yourself, am I the problem, or am I part of the problem? Now, here's some of the questions that you can ask yourself and that I should ask myself. Am I being too demanding? See, what seems reasonable to you and to me may not be reasonable to somebody else. So you got to ask yourself, am I being too demanding? Am I being too insensitive? See, when somebody comes and talks to me or shares something, whether it be a spouse, a family member, or whoever, am I being insensitive to what they're talking about? Am I being unrealistic? Is the conflict part of me being unrealistic? Maybe impatient. Am I being too sensitive? Somebody says something and I wear my emotions on my sleeve and I get angry, upset, or whatever. You have to begin going through this process of asking questions. In other words, what part do you play? What part do I play in the conflict? You've got to analyze the problem. And let me share this with you. If you're part of a family of more than two people, in other words, you have children, if there is a conflict in the household, it affects more than just the two people. It affects the entire household. Okay, so there's more people involved. Okay, so you've given your life to the Lord, you've talked to God about the problem, then you've analyzed it, then you go to the next step, which is to schedule a peace conference. Schedule a peace conference. In other words, you and I have to deal with the problem face to face. Okay? Face to face. You see, problems and conflicts are rarely solved accidentally. And what we tend to do in our relationships is we tend to just let things go. There's a problem or conflict, and what we do, we figure time will take care of it. See, if we just don't deal with it or talk about it or try to bring resolution to it, time will take care of it. But that's not true, because what you have now is a conflict that's on the back burner and simmering. And when a new problem comes on, you've just added something to the mix. See, that pot of stew, so to speak, gets more ingredients put in it. And what happens in marriages is they continue to let that cook, and more problems get put into this stew, so to speak, until it becomes too full and it explodes. You've got to deal with it face to face, case by case. In other words, we have to resolve the conflict deliberately, to sit down and resolve it deliberately. In Matthew 5 it says, if you remember your brother has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar and go at once to make peace with your brother, and then come back and offer your gift to God. See, this is teaching us something. This is teaching us that we have to resolve things between one another. And then we can come to God. See, if we have a problem with our spouse or one of our children or in the family or in the church or neighbor or whatever, that is going to hamper our relationship with God. And God says, before you give the altar, go take care of the situation and then come back. Now, since I am a Southern Baptist preacher, I've got to exegete this verse so you understand exactly what it says. Are you ready for this? Now, you need to see this. Look on your verse right there. It says to get your offer and leave it here first before you go. I thought I'd try. The principle here is before God's going to receive your offering and my offering, we've got to be in a right relationship. By the way, it's the same teaching that we find in the Lord's Supper, that we are to be right with Him first and one another before we participate in the Lord's Supper. Okay, here's a good one. Anybody here ever had a fight on the way to church? Some of you look like you had a fight before getting here. You know what? Darlene and I used to have fights every once in a while before we got to church. I know y'all find that hard to believe. But, stuff would happen. Especially when you're different. I like to be there early. Not on time. I like to be there early. And see, Darlene thinks that times are just, it's like the speeding is 55. That's somewhere around there is good. Well, when you're supposed to be at somewhere at 9 o'clock, she just figures, well, if you get around the neighborhood at 9 o'clock, that's a pretty good deal. So because we look at those things differently, it would cause some conflict from time to time. But the Lord stepped in and He resolved that in our lives. And I praise Him for that. You see, what happened is I went in the ministry. And so what happens is I get up early, get ready, get myself ready and all that, and then I come over here before even half the family gets up. So I don't have to worry about that anymore. I'm here, and I'm enjoying music, and everything is wonderful and peaceful. But Darlene, she's got to get the three girls up and get them ready and fight and hassle with them. So sometimes, every once in a while, not often, she'll come looking like a wreck. But praise God, I am peaceful and joyful. I'm not involved in those fights anymore coming to church. I'm just picking at you. I got off track just a little bit. Folks, we have to schedule a peace conference. Let me give you a couple of things to do, a couple of points about this. There are two things that we have to choose appropriately. The first thing is to choose the right time. It's important that we choose the right time. Folks, timing is important. It is critical. I was in this position, I guess, about 6 months when I learned this. And if I ever do it again, I just hope somebody whoops me hard. You see, I went to tell somebody right before service got started something that they needed to know. It was information that they needed to know, but it wasn't real positive information. That ruined the whole service for them, their family, and for me. They could not worship God. You see, right information, wrong time. Timing is very important. My family's learning this, the kids especially. When Mom gets home from being at work all day, she doesn't want the kids jumping all over her, asking her 14 million questions. She needs 30 minutes or an hour to just be used to being at home. And when they learn that and grasp that idea, they'll find that the yeses will increase. Less inclined to say yes until she has that little bit of downtime. By the way, I need to say this. Darlene did that for me for years when I was working and she was at home. She would constantly be after the kids. Don't be, not, we want to love on them, But don't ask a bunch of questions. Can I do this? Can I go there? Give Dad time to just be at home for a little while before you do those things. And I know I appreciate that. And we're still trying to teach them, in her case, too, coming home from a hard day at work. You see, the questions are okay. The viewpoints are okay. The information you want to impart is okay. But you got to choose the right time. Some people are night people. See, I'm a 11, 12, 1 o'clock kind of guy. Some of you are even later than that. But some of you are earlier than that. Some of you don't do mornings. You never met a morning that you like. You need to figure that out. Is morning good? Is afternoon good? Is evening good? Is weekends good? You've got to figure out the right time. So choose that very carefully. That's good for both of you, by the way. The second thing is you've got to choose the right place. You've got to choose the right place. The best way to do this is to get a neutral place. If there's a neutral place in the home, that's good. Really, outside the home is even better. But a neutral place, a place where you can be at, where there's no interruptions, that you can sit down and actually pray before you begin discussing the situation. And when you go to this neutral place, it is a must that you come with an attitude of love. Remember this, folks. The idea here is to attack the problem and not each other. Okay? You want to attack the problem, but not each other. Okay. E. Establish the ground rules. Establish the ground rules. See, there are certain words, attitudes, expressions that you must not do, you must not say. I'll tell you what, you don't have to be married very long before you figure out your spouse's hot button. You know the phrase or the attitude or anything that will just set them off just like that. Folks, leave that at home. That is not the time to be doing that nonsense. In fact, if at all possible, don't ever do it, if possible. But definitely during this peace conference, do not push those hot buttons. In other words, do not provoke one another. In Proverbs it says, the fool, that's a strong word, the fool who provokes his family to anger and resentment will have nothing worthwhile left. Folks, don't do that on purpose. I know sometimes it comes out on accident. That's something else. But definitely don't do it on purpose. Don't push those buttons. So we want to deal with this. There are 7 keys or 7 rules to fighting fair. See, very few of you raised your hand on that. So this is your premarital counseling that you get after you've been married. How to fight fair. Because folks, you're going to fight. Anyone in here not ever had a fight? Wow. I was hoping somebody would raise their hand so I could sit down with them and say, how do you do that? Okay, fighting fair. We'll assume that Dawn is in a fog and... Okay. 7 keys or rules to fighting fair. They're called the battle of the 7 C's. Okay? First thing, number 1, never compare. Never compare. Let me tell you what I mean by that. Have you ever heard or said, why can't you be like... Why can't you be like my dad or my mama? Why can't you be like your brother? Why can't you be like your sister? Why can't you be like your... See, you're comparing. What you're saying is you're wanting your spouse to be like somebody else that you hold in high esteem. And that's comparing, and that's not fair. They are an individual, unique. That's saying, why can't you be like? Here's the flip side of that. You are just like. You're just like your dad. I know it. But that's, I am who I am. Don't say that, because when you say that, you're saying you're like this other person that I don't think very much of. So not only are you making a negative comment to your spouse, you're making a negative comment about the person you just compared them to. Don't compare. Don't do that. Okay. Second thing, never condemn. Never condemn. Here's condemning words and phrases. You always... And then you can fill in the blank. You always burn supper. That's not a personal commentary, by the way. Darlene's a wonderful cook. Once a month. Just kidding. You always, and then you say what it is that they always do. Okay, that's condemning. You can go the other route and say, you never take the trash out. You see how that's negative? You see how that's condemning? When you say you ought to, when you say you should, or when you say you ought to be ashamed because of, those are condemning words and phrases. Now, you know the single most damaging word in all of those phrases I just used is the word you. Because you made it personal when you did that. When you, here I'm using it myself, when you say you are now making it personal to your spouse, the person that you're supposed to love and commit your life to. Let me give you another way to do that, okay? Instead of saying you and then attaching on, how about doing this? How about saying I? Let's use the idea that you want the trash taken out. Instead of saying you never take out the trash, say, I sure would appreciate it if you'd take the trash out. It makes me feel wonderful when you do that for me. Now you say, oh, come on, get real. Well, let me ask you, which way do you think is more likely to get the result you want? I'll be as unreal as I need to be to get the goal accomplished. But you understand that now it's not personal? When you use the word I feel this when you do that. I would like for this to happen. Can you do that? Women, can I share something with you about men? About your husband? Husbands love to solve problems. Husbands love to be the knight in shining armor. You see, I need to take notes on this. You want your husband to do the things you want him to do? Then say, I would like for you to. I appreciate it. It makes me feel good when you do this or don't do that or whatever. Do you know that husbands respond to that mostly? Most husbands do. Because most husbands want their wife to think well of them. Do you know that men were created with large egos? Okay, we weren't created that way, but we have them. Most of us do. Really, I'm telling you the truth. And if you want your husband to respond in certain ways, then make him feel good and that he is helping you in the process. Use the word I. I need, I would like, or I feel. Okay, never command. Never command. Commanding phrases are this. I demand that you do. I demand this. This must happen. Okay? Anything that is a command or a demand is going to bring instant conflict. Okay? And I'll just use a personal example. It's the worst way in the world to get me to do anything. In fact, I'm so hard-headed and so terrible, if you make it in the form of a command, I'm going to purposely do the opposite. Am I right? It's a flaw on my part, but I'm just telling you that when you make it in a command, I don't care if it's a man or a woman, a husband or a wife, when you put it in the form of a command, expect immediate conflict. It's going to happen. Nobody likes to be told what to do. Spouse, let me share something with you. It's a revelation to you. You're not the parent, you're the spouse. See, last time I took orders was from my mom and dad. I still take orders from them. But anyway. Okay, never demand. Number 4, never challenge. Never challenge. By that I mean threats. In other words, don't do things like, just try that and see what happens. See, that's a threat. If you do this, this is going to be my response to it. That's a threat. I dare you to do this or say that or whatever, because here's what I'm going to do. That's a threat. Let me share with you the 3 most common threats in a marriage, okay? The 3 most common threats in a marriage. And let me tell you this, when you get to the peace conference, you must commit yourself to never, ever bring out these dangerous weapons. Never. Here they are. Money, sex, and divorce. Those are the 3 guns that people bring out the most. Whether it's husband or wife, I have the money. I control the money. And unless you do what I want, you ain't getting none of the money. That's a threat. Men are usually along those lines. Sex. Women are usually along those lines. Husband, I'm not going to do what you want unless you do these things. Unless you read your Bible differently than me, Paul tells wives, as well as husbands, but wives not to deny your husband. That's a threat. That's a weapon that is used in a marriage. And then the other one is divorce. If things aren't going the way I want, if you don't do this or change, I'm leaving. Divorce is on the way. Please never, ever, ever, ever use that, because you will not resolve conflict if you use those 3, any of those 3. All right, number 5, never condescend. Never condescend. That means treating as inferior. Have you said this or have you heard this? You shouldn't feel that way. Somebody expresses how they feel about something and we say, that's not true. You have no right to feel that way. Can I say something to you about feelings? You own your feelings. Nobody else does. How you feel is genuine to you. It's neither right nor wrong. It's how you feel. Are you with me? Nobody else has the right to tell you how to feel. And nobody has the right to deny you the way that you feel. Now, I'm not saying that your feelings may not be misguided or misplaced on a particular case, because that may be. But the very wrong thing to do is to say you shouldn't feel that way, or you have no right feeling that way. For instance, let's say a wife is assuming or feeling like their husband is cheating on her, and he may not be, and she says, honey, I feel like you're going astray. Well, if he begins to blast her, you shouldn't feel that way, and I've never done it, and that's a wrong feeling. You see, he's not helping the situation. What he needs to do is begin to address the feeling. Why is that feeling there? Is he absent a lot? Is he not showing enough affection? Why is she feeling that way? Am I making sense? Do like this or like this? Okay. All right. That's condescending, by the way. It's telling someone that they ought not feel, do, or think what they're doing. Okay, number 6, never contradict. Never contradict. By contradict, I mean interrupting. Interrupting. Now, here's some good statistics. The average person can talk 150 words a minute. That sounds like a lot of words to me. 150 words a minute. That's the average. The average person, however, can listen to 650 words a minute. Folks, that leaves 500 words a minute worth of boredom. Now, let's see if I'm telling the truth here. Now, what happens is you're listening to your spouse, right? And they're speaking 150 words a minute. You can listen to 650. And so what you're doing, while you're listening to them, you begin formulating your battle plan. You're listening, and you're going, oh, that's not right. I can move in on this little deal. And, I can get her on this one. And you begin forming a battle plan, and you can't wait to unload it, so you begin interrupting. Some of y'all done that. Okay? Here's the way it ought to work. Give your undivided attention to everything that's being said by your spouse until they are completely through. Okay? Then when they are completely through, if you need to take a moment to kind of dissect what they've said and take on, that's fine. It's okay to have a little bit of silence. And then you can respond. And you can speak, and your spouse ought to be quiet until you're completely done. That's the way it ought to be. Okay? Do not contradict. In other words, interrupt. Listen. Give your undivided attention. 7, never confuse. Never confuse. By that I mean bring in unrelated issues. Let's see if any of you can relate to this one. Your spouse is sharing something with you, and they're just whooping up on you. I mean, they got it down, and you know that they're right. You go, and you're starting to squirm. Oh, they're right. They're saying I do this or say that way. And there's nothing you can do. They're absolutely right. But because you don't like that, and I don't like that, what we sometimes will do is bring in something else because you want something else to hit them with. For instance, let's say in our house, I'm supposed to take the trash out every day. Okay? Obviously, that's a minor deal. It could be something much major than that. Okay, so we began talking about it. Darlene says, you promised that you'd take the trash out, and I noticed that for 2 or 3 weeks it hadn't been taken out. And, you agreed that that's your responsibility and that kind of stuff. Now, here I am. I'm hearing this, and I don't like it. So I say, well, you know what? 3 months ago, you didn't cook supper on a Thursday night that you told me to. Now, I know that, it's going out on a limb, being a little ridiculous. But you understand, we do have a tendency to do that. We'll bring in an unrelated issue because we want to score points. Because what's happening is they're sinking our ship. Don't do that. Don't confuse. Don't bring in unrelated issues. Deal with each issue on its own merit before you move on to the next one. Let me say this once again, folks. Attack the issue and not each other. Attack the issue and not each other. All right, Proverbs 11 brings us out. The fool who provokes his family to anger and resentment will have nothing worthwhile left. We read that earlier. Okay, F. Switch your focus. Remember, we're going in order here. So by the time you get to here and you've got the conference and you're in the conference, then you begin to switch your focus. Because probably what's happened in this conflict is both of you have been thinking about yourself. And this idea of switching your focus is to take it from self to the other person. Go from selfishness to unselfishness. Philippians says each of you should look out not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Did not Christ have an attitude for others? Did he not care about them more than he did himself? Did he not elevate their interests? Of course he did. And what you need to do is begin asking not only yourself, but ask your spouse, how can I meet that need? How can I make this conflict better? How can I be a better spouse to you? Okay, G. You switched your focus. You've done all these things so far. It still doesn't seem to be working out. Then you need to ask for advice. Ask for advice. This is what's amazing to me, being in the pastorate. I've noticed this a lot more. We go to doctors when we're sick, don't we? Most of us. Now, some of us are stubborn. We don't go unless we absolutely have to. But by and large, most of us will go to the doctor when we don't feel well. We want to go get the problem fixed. Teeth. If we've got a problem with teeth, hurting or they need to be straight, whatever, we go to a dentist, don't we? We go to a professional. We want to solve that little situation. Accountants. We go to accountants to solve our tax problems or IRS or whatever. We want to get that solved, so we go to an accountant. If we have legal problems, buying and selling, whatever, we go to a lawyer. We don't have any problems going to these professionals to deal with that problem at hand. And I am amazed. I am absolutely stunned that when it comes to relationships, we refuse to seek professional help. I don't know why we don't do it, but we don't. And usually by the time it gets to me, it's just right next to divorce. In fact, in some cases, papers have been served. And yet, okay, Pastor, wave the wand and everything will be better. It doesn't work that way. You get to this point and you still don't have resolution, please, please, please get help. And can I say this to you? I am a certified counselor. You need to understand that's different than license. License means you have a degree in counseling, whereas I'm certified, which means I have training in it. And I am more than happy to help anybody, whether it's marital or family or whatever. I am more than happy to help. And folks, if I can't solve your problem or help, I will get you to somebody who can. Now, I do know that some people go, I don't want my pastor to know what kind of problems we're having. I don't want my pastor to know I've done this, or whatever. And that's okay. I understand that. If you're not going to come see me, at least go see somebody. Now, the one thing about me is I'm cheap. In fact, I'm free. You can't get cheaper than that. But I'm available, and if you don't want to see me or if I can't help you, we'll get you to somebody else. But please get some help. Don't be ashamed. You know what you're saying when you're going to go get help? You're saying that relationship is important enough to you that you want to get it resolved. That's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of strength. Okay. Proverbs says, conceited people do not like to be corrected. They never ask for advice from those who are wiser. If you refuse to learn, you are hurting yourself. So my question is, what's it worth to you to have a harmonious home to come home to? I don't know about you, but it's worth an awful lot to me. All right, H, don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up, don't walk out, resolve the conflict. Let me ask you this question. Would you agree that conflict resolution is easy? Do this, because that's the right answer. It is not easy. It is very difficult. And the amazing thing is this, no matter who's involved in the conflict, whether it's a husband and wife, or employees, or friends, or church members, I want you to know that there are 3 stages to every conflict. Stage 1 is the recognition stage. You see, you're in the conflict, you're involved, and there's tension and stuff going on, and you realize, oh, we've got a problem. There's a problem. It's the recognition stage. Well, then it usually, because nothing is done, it goes on to stage 2, which is called the reaction stage. See, when you let that problem go on, you go to stage number 2, and what happens in stage number 2 is you are so enmeshed and engrossed in the problem, it has gotten so bad that now you're treating one another terribly. You're saying things that are hurtful. You're pulling out the weapons, and you're doing everything. There's a war going on. That's stage 2. And I might add that if it gets to this point, you just need to understand that before it's going to get better, it's probably going to get worse. And I want to tell you why. If you've ever had a sore on you, it's going to sound gross, but it had blood or pus in it or whatever, do you know that thing's going to hurt a little while and kind of leak out and ooze out before it actually gets healed? Now, I want to share this with you. I know that sounds gross, but listen to this. Do you know that people are the same way? That when you get to this stage 2, there's so much anger and bitterness and resentment and hurt inside a person that the only way that they're going to be able to get healed is to let it come out. And as a spouse, you're going to have to just listen to it, whether it's true or not. You've got to listen to it. That's part of the healing process. As part of what I try to do in the counseling sessions is to let them vent. So don't take it personal. They're just going to vent. Because what they're going to say is true in their mind. We're not discussing true or false, but we need to heal this person. They need to be allowed the freedom to get that stuff out. Okay? Stage 2. Stage 3, if it goes on, is resolution. Stage 3 is the healthy part. In other words, you got to the point where you want to do something about it. What can we do to resolve this? I have sad news for you, though. Many people never get past stage 2. In fact, the majority of people never get past stage 2. They chuck it. It's too painful, too hurtful. They can't deal with it, and they bail out. There is a quote at the bottom of your sheet that I hope you'll remember, and it says this: "It is more rewarding to resolve a conflict than it is to dissolve a relationship." Folks, that doesn't matter whether it's in the family or whether it's in the church or whether it's a neighbor or an employee or employer. It is more rewarding to resolve a conflict than it is to dissolve a relationship. Galatians 6:9 says, "Let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." You see, folks, we are to model our family relationships like Christ modeled them. Do you know what Christ gave up for you? Do you know what Christ gave up to have a relationship with you? He gave up his life. Do you realize that you are so important to him that he went to the cross for you and for me? And that is the attitude and the spirit of love that we are to have towards one another, as husband and wife, as father and mother, church member, and those kinds of things. See, you're worth everything to him. I don't know about you, but I find great joy and comfort in knowing I'm worth that much, because I don't feel worth that much. You know, I mean, as far as, I don't know that I'm worth that much. But you know what? Christ thinks I'm worth that much. He thinks you're worth that much. So let me say this. That means that you and I need to give him, first of all, our life. See, if we don't know Christ as Savior, there's going to always be that conflict with God. And if we have a conflict with God, we are going to have a conflict with one another. So that's a relationship we need to get right first, is to give him our life through salvation. Let me say this to you. Once that's done, can I say this to you, please, especially those of us that are married? Would you please give him your marriage? Would you please give him your spouse? Your spouse is not going to be perfect. Neither are you. Give him your spouse. If you'll give him your spouse, you'll find that your marriage gets better whether your spouse does or not. Do you realize that? Your marriage is not based solely on how your spouse responds and reacts. It's also based on you. See, if you are so in love with Christ, you can deal with whatever's coming your way. Christ says that you can and that I can. Give him your family. Some of us, maybe, I don't know, maybe we have children or youth that we're having trouble with. Give him your child. Give him your child. Trust in him. Give him your child. Folks, give him your church. Give him this church. This church doesn't belong to you or it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to Christ. And we are blessed and fortunate to be able to be a part of it. Give it all to Christ. Let me ask you to stand, please. I want to ask if you would to bow your heads, please.